Are you ready to dive into the captivating world of motion graphics? Well, in just 40 minutes, I'll guide you through creating seamless animations using After Effects. Whether you are a beginner or have some experience with the application, this tutorial is packed with valuable tips and techniques to elevate your projects. So here is what we'll cover. We'll start by importing an Illustrator artwork and create a comp out of it. Then we'll create some shape layers, animate them, and finesse the animation using the graph editor for some advanced controls. We'll also use effects, text animators, and few secret surprises that I can't reveal at this stage. Finally, I'll show you how to export your masterpiece for online viewing. This crash course is loaded with goodies, so grab your mouse and join me on this exciting journey into easy motion graphics in After Effects. If you want to follow along, you'll find the link for the project files in the description below. Make sure to extract the zip file, and while the After Effects project you'll find there is the final version, I highly recommend starting fresh to truly immerse yourself and finish with a sense of accomplishment. Okay, let's get started. So I'm looking at the Dreamer.ai. This is the artwork that you got from me. Notice that here inside Illustrator we have several layers. One of them include live text, so those are live titles. But now I'll switch to After Effects and then double click somewhere over here in the gray portion of the project panel, and this will invoke the import dialog. Navigate to where you extracted the exercise files and locate the Dreamer.ai. This is the same document that we just saw a moment ago inside Illustrator. Go ahead and click Open or Import if you're working on the Windows side, and in the import kind, make sure to select Composition, and for the footage dimensions, we'll select layer size. So each one of the layers is going to be cropped to its minimal dimensions. Then I'll click OK, and After Effects is going to create a composition from the file. I'll double click to open up the composition, and in my case, I can see the length is 15 seconds. This is based on the last time that I've created something inside After Effects based on an Illustrator or a Photoshop document. So to change this, I'll go to the Composition menu and choose Composition Settings. Now, you may see something different depending on what you did, but in my case, I'll select the duration and I'll type in 700 to convert it to 7 seconds. I'm also going to change the frame rate. I'll choose 25. You can go with whatever you want. Now, before I'll click OK, I'll visit the 3D renderer and make sure that under renderer, we are using the classic 3D, which is going to be enough for this exercise. Then I'll click OK. And now I'm going to lock the background by clicking on this little lock icon, as well as hide the titles and the rocket. We're going to return to them in a later stage, but this is all we need to do for now. Now I want to create 5 stars, blink them in an overshoot staggering animation. And we can do all of this using After Effects native shape layers. Let me show you how. I'll make sure nothing is selected here, and I'll click to select the rectangle tool. Now in my case, the fill is set to white. If you are seeing something else, click on the word fill, make sure it is set to solid, and then choose white color for it. For the stroke, you can do the same thing, but this time, just make sure that it is set to none. We don't need any stroke for this. Then I'll double click on the rectangle tool to create a shape layer at the dimensions of the composition. I'll select the shape layer here in the timeline and I'll press return, and first I'll name it star 1. Next, I'll open up the rectangle one and notice that what we're seeing here is parametric shapes. So this is basically a mini Illustrator inside After Effects. I'll remove the stroke, I don't need it, so I'll select and press delete. And then I'll open up rectangle path number 1 and change the size to 30 pixels. Now it's difficult to see what I'm doing here, so let's zoom into the composition. The easiest way to do it is press the period key. So I'll tap it twice, and then I'll take this shape and move it somewhere over here. Then I'll close rectangle path number 1 and I'll open up its transform. Over here, for the rotation, I'll change the value to 45 degrees, which create a diamond. I'll then close the transform. This is the best way to work with everything in the timeline. Once you finish with something, just close it. Otherwise, it gets very crowded very fast. The next step is to click on this add, which is a set of mathematical operations that we can add to shape layers. In this case, I want the pucker and bloat operator. So I'll open it up, and for the amount, I'll click and start to drag to the left to create this spiky star. So I ended up with a value of -30. Now, in my case, the mask and shape path boundary is hidden. If you are seeing something different, click on this icon. This is a toggle that will help you to just see the path, the shape, without its original outline. All right, so now I'll close this guy. I'm also going to close the entire thing here, basically just collapse the layer. And now I want to create an overshoot scale animation. So I'm going to animate it from the end, meaning I'll click over here, type in 15 to go to 15 frames, and then I'll open up the transform settings. I'll start by creating a keyframe for the scale at 15 frames, and then I'll go to the beginning and set it to 0. Now, if I'll press spacebar, I can preview the animation. So this is how it looks. Not exactly what I had in mind. And the reason is that by default, the anchor point is set to the middle of the frame, and After Effects, of course, is using the anchor point to control and animate all the other geometry properties. So we need to fix it. I'll make sure the star layer is selected by clicking on it. Hold down Command, this will be Control on the Windows side, and double click on the pan behind, in parentheses, anchor point tool. And this is going to bring the anchor point to the middle of the shape. Now, if you want this to be the default behavior, there is actually a setting in the preferences that you can change. So on the Mac side, you'll need to go to After Effects, Settings, General. On the Windows side, it is under Edit, Preferences. And over here, just check this option, Center Anchor Point in New Shape Layers. Next time you'll create a shape layer, the anchor point will be in the middle of the shape. But now, if we're going to go to the start and preview the animation, this is what we have. More closer to what I had in mind, but it is still very linear. So to remedy this, I'll click on the word Scale, which is going to select both keyframes, and then I'll go to Animation, and under Keyframe Assistant, I'll choose Easy Ease. Notice the keyboard shortcut is F9, and I'm going to use it from now forward. Now, if I'll return back to the beginning, it will look smoother, so we have an Easy Ease at the beginning and Easy Ease at the end. But I actually want to overshoot the scale. I want it to become bigger and then go back to 100. So to do this, I'll click on the graph editor icon, and I'll make sure that I'm using the value graph. Then I'll click on the last keyframe here, and I have this lever, this handle, which I can click and drag. So I'll drag it up above the 100%, something between 100 and 150. And then I'll take this handle and drag it so it would look like this. So this is the shape that I'm after. I'll go to the start and press spacebar to preview it. And we have the overshoot scale animation that we need. I'll click again on the graph editor to return back to the keyframes view. And then I want to duplicate this star 4 times and place it in different locations, and then I want to stagger the animation. So I'll return back to the selection tool, very important because we don't need to move the anchor point anymore. And then I'll select this star number 1 and making sure that we are after the keyframes. You can see those 2 tiny dots. This is going to show us the keyframes even though they are not exposed. Now I'll press Command D 4 times to duplicate additional 4 stars. So I want to end up with 5 stars. I'll select star number 2 and I'll just drag it, let's say over here, maybe over here. And then I'll select star number 3 and I'll drag it here. Star number 4 would like to be probably somewhere here. And finally, star 5 above it. Now, each one of these stars needs to be in a different size. So I'll return to star number 2 And just as a reminder, the scale property is already being animated, so we can't use the scale, the master scale, which is this guy under transform, to change the size. What we need to do is go under the contents and locate this scale. Now, this is a lot of twirling, a lot of expanding. So another way to work, I'm going to collapse everything and I'll select star 2, shift click on star 5. I don't want to change star number 1. Star number 1 is okay, this is the first star. And over here in the index search, I'll type scale. And this is going to show me all the scale properties for the selected layers. So I'll climb up so I can see what I'm working with. And this is the scale that I want to change. Let's start with star number 5, making sure that I'm changing the scale which is under the transform of the rectangle, not the master scale. We don't want to touch this guy. And I'm just going to scale it to, let's say, 77. I'll scroll down and change the scale for the 4th star. And then I'll scroll down again for star number 3. This one wants to be maybe more tiny, so around maybe 50%. And then scroll down to star number 2, and I'll scale it like so. So something like this. And of course, we can move them if we like. So maybe something like this, trying to create a nice arrangement. Once finished, I'll clear the search term. I'll go to the beginning. And finally, I want to create the staggering animation, because right now, if I'll preview the animation, everything is coming up at the same time. So I'll return back to the beginning. This time I want to select all my shape layers. Another way to work is to click on the color label of one of those layers and select the label group. And because all of them are using the same color, After Effects is going to select everything for us. Next, I'll go to 5 frames by highlighting the timecode area, typing 5, pressing return to accept it, and I want to trim all the layers. So I can, of course, grab everything and move it to 5 frames while holding down Shift. In a moment, I'll also show you a keyboard shortcut to do the same thing. But now that everything is 5 frames long, I'll go to the animation menu, and from the keyframe assistant options, there's only one that I can choose, which is sequence layers. I'll select it and click OK. Now, this is sensitive to the selection, so you can see what it does. It's actually not what I'm going for. So I'll undo the last operation, and this time I'll do it manually. I'll click on star number 1, shift click on star number 5, and After Effects is going to remember the order of selection. So now, if I'll execute the same command, so sequence layer under keyframe assistant, I'm going to get what I'm after. Then I'll go to the end, and while everything is still selected, I want to trim everything to the end. So I want to extend all those layers. And you can do it from the keyboard by holding down the Option key here on the Mac, Alt on Windows, and pressing the closing bracket. And then I'll go back to the beginning and preview the animation. So this is what we've created. I'll click on the magnification ratio pop-up and fit the scene so we can have a look at it from a safe distance. And this is how easy it is to create shape layers in After Effects, then manipulate them using a mathematical operation, in this case pucker and bloat, create an overshoot scale using the graph editor, duplicate it 4 times, as well as staggering the animation. Next, we'll create a crescent moon reveal using the moon itself as a track matte layer. So I'll go to the beginning. I'll select the moon layer and I'll duplicate it by pressing Command D, Control D on the Windows side. Now make sure that you are seeing the modes and matte column. If you can't see this, just click on this icon, which is going to expand or collapse the transfer controls. So what we want to do right now is return to the moon layer, the original one, and use this track matte peak whip and point it to the layer above. Now, because both of them are the same, we can't see anything. But if I click on the next door neighbor icon, it's going to invert the matte. However, we are seeing a thin white hairline around the edge of the layer because After Effects is automatically anti-aliasing the result. So to eliminate this, we'll return to the Moon 2 layer, which is now serving as a track matte, and then we'll press S to isolate the scale and just raise it a little bit, maybe 103, and this is going to solve this issue. Now, what we want to do while we are here is use this Moon 2 layer to reveal the layer underneath. And I'll do it using position keyframes. Now, we can walk from the timeline, or we can actually use the properties panel. So to create a keyframe as well as expose it in the timeline, I'll click on the stopwatch near the word position. It's going to show up over here as promised. And then I'll move to 1 second and 10 frames. And I'll return back to the properties panel, click and drag until I see something like this. So in my case, the value, let's just give you round numbers, 330. As before, I want to easy ease the animation, so I'll click on the word position and then I'll tap F9 to create an easy ease motion. Going back to the beginning, this is how it looks. And what I would like to do is select all the stars. We know that we can click on the label color, select all the label group, and I want to start the stars where the moon animation has ended. So I'll move my current time indicator to this keyframe. You can do it from the keyboard by pressing the letter J. So J is going to move to the previous visible keyframe and K is going to move to the next visible keyframe. So if you are following me, make sure that you are at 110 and then click and move all of these layers. And this is going to make sure the stars are going to appear only after the reveal of the crescent moon is finished. To verify it, I'll close everything here, deselect and press spacebar and see how this works. Looking good. All right, this is a great time, by the way, to save our progress. So I'll press Command S here on the Mac, Control S on Windows. I'll call the project Dreamer and I'm going to save it on the desktop. Now let's give some love to the main character here, the child who's hanging from the moon. The plan is to swing him down from side to side in a pendulum animation style. We are going to use a combination of an effect, repeating keyframes, and a cool graph editor trick that you'll be able to repurpose with your own animations. So let's see it step by step. I'll start by going to the beginning, select the child layer, and just so it will be easier to differ it, I'll click and hold on the color label group and set it to purple. Then I'll go to 1 second by typing in 100, and I'll hold down Shift and move the layer to start over here. So the moon is going to be revealed first, and then we're going to create the animation for the child, and then of course we have those stars blinking in. Okay, so I already know that I want to rotate him in a pendulum style from this point, meaning that it's probably going to be a good idea to select the pan behind the anchor point tool and move the anchor point to the edge over here. Now, if you want to be exact, hold down the Command key here on the Mac, Control on Windows, and this is going to allow you to snap to different points in your composition layers, in this case, the upper point of this layer. Then I'll let go and return back to the Selection tool. The next thing that I want to do is apply an effect. Now, I happen to know that this effect is under the Effect Distort category, and the one that I want to use is this one, CC Bandit. So this is one way to locate the effect if you have some experience with After Effects. Another way is, of course, to use the Effects and Presets panel. So you can start to tap the words that you're after. In this case, I want to bend something, so let's search for bend. I'm not after any background animation. I have two options. So I'll start with the CC Bandit because I know this one is the one that works better in this case. To apply the effect to a selected layer in the timeline, all you need to do is double click on it. Now, if I'll grab those points here, which are the start and end, you can also click to see where the target is. So in this case, the start is over here. We probably want to set it to the top of the layer, so something over here, and then click to see where the end target is, and then move it to the desired location. And now to preview how this animation is going to work, we can play with the bend slider. But notice there is a problem. This effect is limited to the boundaries of the layer. And this means that it can't render anything outside of the boundaries of this layer. Now, there are a few ways to solve this in After Effects. Actually, for every problem inside After Effects, there are at least 4 different solutions. In this case, one solution will be to pre-compose this layer, and this means that we can tell it to take under account the dimensions of the comp. Another solution, when it comes to vector layers, like this AI layer over here, is to use the continuously rasterize or collapse transformation switch. Now, in my case, I'm only seeing the transfer controls, so I'll need to click on this icon to expand the layer switches panel. And of course, if I want to, I can click on this and move them and arrange them in the timeline the way I want. The icon that I'm referring to, the switch, is this one. If I'll click on it, After Effects is telling us in the header of this panel that the name is continuously rasterized. And once I let go, you can see that now we have access to all the pixels regardless of the size. And this is because for vector layers, the render order is changed. And once we are setting it to continuously rasterize, After Effects is going to take under account the size of the composition. And this means that all we need to do is just reposition the start and the end target. If you can't see this, by the way, you can zoom out by pressing the comma key. And then I'm going to drag it to where it was before. So basically at the edge of the layer. And now when I'm bending this layer, it works in a more expected way. Okay, so I'll start at the beginning with a value of 40, create a keyframe for the bend, and then I'll move 20 frames forward. You can do it by holding down Shift and pressing page down twice. And then I'll highlight this value and add a minus sign before. Now I want to see those keyframes in the timeline because I only have 2 and I want to duplicate them. So this animation is going to go almost all the way until the end. And to do this, I'll go to the animation menu and I'll select Reveal Properties with Keyframes. You can also press the letter U in the keyboard to remind yourself, what I did. Here are my keyframes. Now I can select both of them by marking around them and I'll copy them to the clipboard. I'll move another 20 frames forward, Shift page down twice, and I'll paste the same keyframes. I'll do this another time and another time. And now if I'll go to the beginning of this layer, this is the animation that I have. Very linear and robotic, but we already know how to fix it. Select the value that you want to edit, in this case bend, and press F9, and it's going to easy ease the animation. But we want it to settle down. So to do this, I'll make sure all the keyframes are selected, as in my case, and I'll visit the graph editor again. Now, when you enter the graph editor, although all the keyframes were selected, After Effects is going to deselect them for you. I'm not sure why, but this is how it works. So we'll need to click again on the word bend to select the bounding box around all of those keyframes. And this is the trick. We want to hold down Option, Alt on Windows, plus Shift, which is going to help us constraining the motion up and down, left or right. In our case, we just want to stretch everything down. And by holding down the Option key with Shift, we can stretch everything to the 0 point, which is this line, the center gray line. And we can do the same thing for the negative values. So holding down Option and then Shift and dragging it all the way over here will create this shape. And again, if I'll preview the animation, you can see that the values are slowly going to decay until we end up with this guy hanging on the rope. I'll return back to the regular view by clicking again on the graph editor icon. And all I need to do is just scale him so he won't just appear from nowhere. And to do it, I'll make sure nothing is selected. So I'll click outside, then reselect the layer, and then I'll move 10 frames forward. So 110. And I want to create a keyframe for the scale and expose it. So I'll click on the scale value in the properties panel. And then I'll go to the beginning of the layer by pressing I. I is the in point of the layer, and I'll set the scale value to 0. Click the word scale, press F9 to easy ease these keyframes, go to the start and preview the animation so far. And I think it looks really promising. To add secondary motion to this cute teaser, I'll animate the rocket to fly across the moon and let it play among the stars. Now the stars are coming soon, so stay tuned. In other words, I love you. All right, let's see how to tackle this. I'll return back to our timeline. I'll close the child layer and I'll enable the rocket layer. Remember, we have this rocket waiting for us patiently without doing anything, basically just stationary. All right, I'll change the rocket label to something else. Let's give it a fiery orange label. I think it works nice here. And then I'll start it at 2 seconds. So I'll move my current time indicator to 2 seconds and I'll drag the layer. Holding down Shift will help me to snap it to this place. Now, what I would like to do is make this rocket fly in a circular way around the moon. So the way to tackle it is to go to the View menu and show the rulers. I'm also going to clear the search from last time just so it won't distract us. And now what I would like to do is select one of the moon layers. So it doesn't matter which one, let's go with this one. This is going to show us the center point of the moon. And because we've enabled the rulers, we can drag a guide from upstairs. I'll place it at the center of this layer, more or less. And then I'll drag a vertical guide and place this one over here above the center of the moon. Now I'll return back to the rocket layer. And again, we are going to use our friend, the pan behind tool. I'll click on it and start to move this. Now you can take the anchor point in After Effects and move it outside of the layer's boundary. So what I want to do is just move it and it will automatically snap to the point where these two guides are meeting. And now I can animate the rotation of this rocket. So we can do it again from the Properties panel. I'll click on the degrees here and show you how this works and just find out what are the values that I need. So probably I want to start from maybe -40. I'll click to create a keyframe where I am at 2 seconds. And then I'll go all the way to the end and type in 220. This value is going to end up where I want the rocket to finish. Now, again, we need to animate the scale. Now, the problem, as you may have guessed, is that the scale is going to be affected by the anchor point. So if I'll try to animate the scale, it doesn't look correct. It looks like it wants to start its journey from the center of the moon, which in reality, I guess is a good idea, but not for our animation. So I'll undo, and I'm also going to hide the guides as well as the rulers. So you can do it by visiting again the View menu, or you can press Command R, and for guides, you have this Command and semicolon keyboard shortcut. This will be Control on the Windows side. And I'm also going to fit our scene so we can see it a bit bigger. I'll return back to the Selection tool, and instead of working with the Scale property, I'll open up the Distort category from the Effects and Presets, and this time I'll take the Transform effect. I'll double click to apply it to the layer, and now I have a set of new transformations which are working as an effect and rendering before the regular transformation of the layer. And this means that I can animate this scale independently of the layer scale. So I'll set the scale at the beginning to 0, create a keyframe here, and then I'll move 20 frames forward. So 220 will take me there. And I'll change the scale to 100%. Then I'll go to the end and I'm going to set it to 0. And now, if we're going to preview the animation, we'll see how this works. Now, if I want to modify those keyframes, I can go to the animation menu, select this command, or press U to see those keyframes. And what I would like to do is just select the middle keyframe here, the one that is 100% for the scale transform effect, and easy ease only this one. So I'll press F9. I'll go a little bit before the animation starts and preview again. And we now see how smooth it looks. And if we look at everything from the beginning, we can see how all the layers are working in concert. And now I think it's time to animate the titles and then, of course, as promised, add some stars. Now, unfortunately, at the time of this recording, we can't convert Illustrator text to editable text in After Effects, which is text that you can eat and edit. So I'll show you the next best thing, which involves a simple recipe of copy and paste between those two apps. This will allow us to audition and use a couple of animation presets that ships with the application and can upgrade any motion graphics piece. So back in our timeline, I'll enable the titles layer. Here they are. I'll select them. And as we can see, we can't go ahead and use layer, create, convert to editable text. This is dim. This is going to work with Photoshop files, but not with Illustrator ones. So what we need to do is go ahead to the edit menu and instead choose edit original. And this is going to bring back Illustrator on screen and show us the document that we are using. Now I'll select this text, which is still a live text in Illustrator, and I'll copy it to the clipboard. I'll switch back to After Effects, and this is very important. You need to make sure nothing is selected, so I'll click somewhere over here, and then from the layer menu, go ahead and select new text. There's also a keyboard shortcut, Command Shift Option T, of course Control Shift Alt T on the Windows side, so you can go ahead and use this. And now when we have a blinking cursor in the middle of the screen, I'll press Command V to paste the text, and everything survived, including the font, the style, the size, whatever you did in Illustrator is now a live text inside After Effects. Now I can switch back to the selection tool, and I can move this text and use the original layer as a reference to make sure it is in the same position. Let's do it again. I'll switch back to Illustrator because we have another line, the desire to escape. I'll copy it to the clipboard, switch back to After Effects this time. I'll press Command Option Shift T. It's going to create an empty text layer. I'll paste what I just copied from Illustrator, return back to the selection tool. I'll move the text and position it. I'm eyeballing it. It doesn't need to be pixel perfect, but as close as I can match it to the original design. I'll select both of these layers, and I can of course drag them down if I want to maintain the same order. And then I'll switch off the visibility of the original titles. Now I want to start those titles at 2 seconds. So I'll select both of these text layers and drag them to start over here. And then I'll deselect and reselect the Dreamer layer. Now I really want to show you how to animate text inside After Effects, but this is going to make this tutorial much longer. So instead, we are going to use some of the built-in animation presets that ships with After Effects. I'll open them, and inside the text folder, we have some additional categories. Now we can open each one of them and have a look at it. Some of the names will indicate what the animation is all about, but since we are visual people, we can also get a free preview. And to do it, you need to go to the flyout menu of the Effects and Presets panel and choose Browse Presets. Notice the ellipsis. This means that something else is going to happen. In this case, Bridge is going to come up. So make sure you install Adobe Bridge. And it's going to automatically direct you to the relevant presets folder in your After Effects installation. I'll double click on the text folder, and let's double click on Animate In. And if I click on each and every one of these, I'm going to get a simple preview that will show me exactly what will happen if I'll double click to apply it. So I'll climb one level up and double click on the 3D text category. And in this case, I know that what I'm after is this one, 3D Basic Rotate Y Cascade In. So all I need to do is double click on this, and since the layer was selected in After Effects, the animation preset is going to be applied automatically at the current time indicator. Let's do this again for the second line. So I'll select the second line, press I to go to the start of the layer, and we can switch back to bridge, or another way to work, by the way, is go to the animation menu, and you also have the same command over here, browse presets. So again, I'll go to the text folder, double click on the blurs folder to see what's inside, and click to see some of the examples. And if I found something that I want to use, in this case, I'm going to use the blur and fade in, the first preset here. I can either double click or right click and place it in the relevant version of After Effects that you have. Depending on how many versions of After Effects you have and what's open, you can actually use Bridge to just refer to the relevant one. So I'll place this one inside the version that I'm using and press spacebar to preview both of those animations together. We're almost done, but I still have a debt to pay. I need to show you how to create a field of twinkling stars in the background of the composition, which we're going to do right now, believe it or not, using a single simulation effect. So to achieve this, I'll make sure nothing is selected. In After Effects, you can just press F2 to deselect, and then I'll go to the layer menu, and under New, I'll create a new solid layer. I'll name it Stars. Make sure it is set to the comp size and the color is white. This is important because the stars needs to be white, which is the same color of all the elements in this composition. I'll click OK, and then using the effects and presets, I'll open up the simulation category, and I'll go ahead and apply the CC Starburst effect. Let's make sure that we are fitting the viewer so we can see what we are working with. And if I'll move the playhead, we can see that we have an extreme star field effect. So we'll need to tone it down. I'll start by changing the size to 20, and I'll change the speed that they are moving to something very slow, 0.01. And I think these are all the settings that I need to modify. Let's go to the beginning. I'm also going to take the stars layer and drag it to be above the background. So of course, the stars are going to be in the back, and I'll press spacebar to preview what we've managed to achieve with this easy to use effect. And now it's time to render the result and share this short teaser with our loved ones. So let me show you how to create a high quality render as well as two web deliverables. One in an MP4 format and the other one as a GIF or a GIF, depending on how you want to say it. So first I'll return back to the project panel and I'll double click and import from the exercise files, if you have access to it, the Dreamer sound effects file that I've created for you. I'll click open and I'll drag and drop it on top of the composition here in the project panel, which is going to place the audio above everything else because it is an audio file. It doesn't have any pixels, so I don't mind. Now, if you want to have a look at the waveform, this is just a bonus tip. You can double tap the letter L. So LL in sequence is going to show you how this looks. This is just in case you're curious, but I think we need to hear how it sounds. So I'll collapse it and I'll preview the file. Nice. And now I want to create a movie out of it, actually 3 movies. So I'll make sure the composition is selected, and then I'll go to the composition menu and I'll add this to the render queue. By default, the render settings is set to best settings, which is what you want in most cases, and the output model is set to H.264 match render settings 15 megabits, which is a decent format. But in our case, I'm going to use this pop-up menu and change this to high quality, which is going to create a master file for us. And then I'll use this plus to add another output model. So I'm going to render once and export a couple of files. If I want, I can add more. So the second file that I want, again from the list, I'll choose the H.264 match render settings, but this time 5 megabits per second, because this is suitable for all the socials. Now I need to give those files a name. As you can see, I can't render because I haven't specified yet the directory as well as the name. So I'll click on the first one and then I'll point it to the desktop. Dreamer is a great name for both of them. One is going to be with the MOV suffix, this is the high quality file, and the other one is going to use the MP4 file. And once ready, I can click render. Now, if I want, I can queue it in Adobe Media Encoder, and this is going to help you if you have long and very complicated project, which is going to allow you to render in the background. But for our purposes, we can just click render, and After Effects is going to process both of the files at the same time. And because we already had some cache files, the render time is just 2 seconds, basically just converting the cache files to a physical file. Now I can open up the output model, click on one of those hyperlinks. It's going to take me to the directory, and from here I can test those files. So this is the high quality one, the master file. You can press spacebar to preview it. And this one is the delivery one. Now I also want to show you how to create a GIF out of this project. So if you have access to Media Encoder, you can use it to create animated GIFs, but it's not the most efficient way to work. Instead, you can use this free application called GIFski, which is available for both Windows and Mac. I'll open it up. And it has a very simple interface. All I need to do is drop a video or open one. So in this case, I'll use my MP4 version. I'll drag and drop it over here. This is the interface. It's going to show us a summary of everything. I think I'm going to change the dimensions to 800 by 800. And I can also tell it how many frames per second to use. So let's just do the maximum in this case. You have also a slider for quality. You can loop it, you can bounce it, you can change the speed, and this is like the best thing that you can see the estimated size before doing the conversion. So I'm happy with everything I'm seeing here. I'll click on convert, wait for a few moments. This is really fast and very efficient, and of course, free. Once it's finished, you can see a little preview. The file is actually smaller than what expected. And if you want, we can share it directly from here. We can copy it and paste it in, let's say, WhatsApp or Messages, or we can just save a copy. So I'll click on Save As, point it to the desktop, click Save, and we can close the application. So here is the GIF output, and of course, this one doesn't support sound. So this brings us to the end of this tutorial. If you made it all the way through, I'm so proud of you. If you also worked with me and created your own animation, I'm also admiring you. In any case, you now have a solid foundation of how to use the most common tools inside After Effects. If this was helpful, please share this video with everyone you know. Also like, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you'll get notifications of other cool stuff that I'm posting here on Stern Effects. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video, or maybe in real life, who knows? Until then, stay creative, take care, and goodbye.